Hello everyone, I'm Paul and welcome to Gelling Outdoors. Today I've got 10 chainsaw tips for you. Let's get started. Tip number 1, always cut with a sharp chain. It's much safer. When you're out in the field, your chain will get dull after you're cutting for a while or if you hit something. What I do is I bring myself about a half dozen pre-sharpened chains and I just change the chain. It's much quicker than sharpening it. Plus the sharpened chains from the shop are much better. Tip number 2, multiple guide bars. If you only have one saw, and let's say it's a 16-inch saw, it's always nice to have an 18-inch or a 20-inch bar in case you need to cut bigger wood. And it's much cheaper to have multiple bars. Obviously you need a different size chain, but having multiple bars and multiple chains, it's much cheaper than having multiple chainsaws. Tip number 3, some of you may not be aware of this one, and that is chainsaws have sights on them. Most of them do, at least. On this particular chainsaw, it has two types of sights. It has a vertical sight, and that vertical sight here is a gunning sight, and that is to be used when you are lining your notch up in the direction that you want to cut the tree down in. It also has a horizontal sight, and that's a plunge cutting sight. So when you're cutting or bore cutting or plunge cutting into a tree, what that does is allows your bar to line up so that your hinge is going to be about the same size across. So two sights, you got your gunning sight and your plunge cutting sight. Some saws also have the sight on both sides. This one here, you don't see the black line, but there is a line here. And also it has it on the top. Some saws only have it on the one side. Tip number 4, most chainsaws have either a baffle or a shutter that allows you to switch between winter and summer mode. Note that the baffle or the shutter may not be in the same location in every saw. In this saw here in particular, the little, you can see in here, there's a little shutter here. It's either on the top or the bottom for summer or winter mode. On this Echo saw, I get the top off. I've got to pull the cover off. I've got to pull my air filter out, and there's inside a little shutter that I either flip with the little, if you can see there or not, you can see that one side is solid and one side's got a hole in it. So whether I put this on this side or have it this way will determine whether it's for winter or summer. Check your manual if you have a shutter or a baffle for your saw for winter or summer mode. The shutter or the baffle, if you have one on your saw, will keep your saw from freezing up during the winter or keep it cool during the summer. Tip number 5, tensioning your chain. When you tension your chain to tighten it up, always lift the bar up. As you can see here, when the bar is flat, when the bar is just hanging on its own, you can see it looks like it's tight already. But if I lift it up, you can see it. You can see a little slack there. So when I tighten my chain, I lift it up and I tighten it, and then I lock the nuts on it while I'm holding it up. The important thing is not to over tighten your chain. If you over tighten it, what will happen is the chain will cause a lot of friction on the bar, and all that heat will get transferred inside to the engine parts of your saw, which can cause a lot of damage. Also, it will damage your bar. So have a little slack. There should always be a little bit. It's all based on how you like it. As long as it's not too tight or too loose to fall off, you're going to be fine. Tip number 6 is a safety tip. Down on the bottom underneath by the bar, you're always going to find, or you should find, not all chainsaws have them, don't ask me why, but there should be a chain catch. In the case of this one here, you can see it's a little wheel, a rolling wheel, If the chain comes off, it will catch on that and it won't whip out at you. There are different styles of chain catches. You can see this one here. I turn the saw the correct way. Under here, hopefully you can see that. There's a chain catch right here. Anyways, make sure that you have one on your saw. It's a very safe thing to have. If that chain ever comes off, it's going to whip. And I've had chains come off many times on me, and that needs to be there. These things do break, and you may not notice that it's broken. Believe me, they do break. And this is something that you should check on a regular basis. Tip number 7 is some pointers on your guide bar. As you can see here, my guide bar, the labeling is upside down. And that is because every once in a while, when you're sharpening your saw, what you should do is you should flip your guide bar over. What that allows for is even wear, and will make your guide bar last a lot longer. The next thing about your guide bar is some of them have sprockets at the end that are greasable, for lack of better words. You can see the little teeth of the sprocket here, and if you look right here, there's a tiny little hole, and this is the type of grease gun you would use. It's a push and lube in this case. And what it allows me to do is to squirt some grease in there by pressing that in, and it lubricates the sprocket at the end. These sprockets get pretty hot and they wear out if you don't grease them. Not all bars allow you to grease them. The ones that I use, some of them have and some of them don't. Oh, the next thing that you should also do every time you sharpen your chain is, or every so often, I guess, you're not going to want to do it every time, but there's a groove on the bar. You should clean it out with a screwdriver or something that's really thin, or compressed air. Blow the groove out all the way around. There's always some dirt in there, and that debris will cause your chain to sit a little higher than it should. Third, or the final thing, is that there's a little hole here on the guide bar, and it's going to be on each side, and that's for your oil for that lubricates your chain to run through. So every once in a while, ensure that you clean those little holes out with compressed air, or a little tool, that whatever you can find that can clean that out with. Tip number 8 is a maintenance tip, and it's a very important one, and most people probably don't do this. And that is, if you open up your chain cover, as you can see here, the sprocket, hopefully I've got that high enough for you to see, there's a little clip that I can take off, and under there, there's a roller bearing. That roller bearing underneath there needs to be lubricated, and you need to lubricate that more often than you actually think. If that little bearing underneath there seizes up, you're going to have all kinds of problems with internal parts of your saw. So that's a very important one. I didn't take the bearing out. It's not very large. It's just a small one. You can use some type of lithium grease or something to lubricate it, or check with your dealer, whatever type of saw you have. But definitely lubricate that roller bearing in there. Tip number 9. This is one that really surprises me. There's a lot of people out there that are not aware of this, and this is an important one, and that's chainsaw bar oil. I'd just like to mention that there are multiple grades of chainsaw bar oil. In this case here, you can see this is a medium. You can get a light and you can get a heavy, and basically you use the light when it's really cold, medium when it's moderate, and when it's pretty warm out, you want a heavy oil for your chainsaw bar. By using the proper oil at the proper time, it will give longevity to your bar, and it will also help your chain to run smoother and help protect the whole system as a whole. That's including your oil pump. Tip number 10, cleaning your saw. One thing that I find is you get a lot of grease and sapwoods. You get, especially from pines and evergreens, you get a lot of sap on your saw. What I find to be the best is just using something simple. What I use is Lysol. It breaks down the grease, cleans the saw really nice, doesn't smell too bad. It's a lot better than using brake cleaner or gasoline and stuff. So This is what I use, Lysol. And for those of you that stuck around to the end of this video, I've got an 11th tip. It's a bonus tip. And that is, after using your saw, after you're finished cutting, loosen the bar nuts. Loosen up your bar nuts and take some tension off your chain. That will prevent your chain from stretching a little bit more than necessary. Just don't forget the next time you go to use your saw that you need to retension your chain. You should be doing that every time anyways, so it's good practice to take some tension off your chain after you've been using it, because once it cools down, it will tighten on your bar. So if you enjoyed this video, I appreciate if you would give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and or if you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button down below. It will help me out with my channel. Once again, thanks for watching Jellin' Outdoors, and we'll see you next time.